Shavua Tov, we have entered the month of Av, and in 1 week it will be the 9th of Av, a fast which recollects the destruction of both temples, the first one in 586 before the Common Era, the second one in the year 70, both of them nearly more than, well, one almost 2 millennia ago, and the first one even more than 2 millennia ago, and which raises the question of, do we live in the past? How do we relate to the past? Why are we fasting and having such intense sadness on the 9th of Av about events that took place so long ago? Well, the answer may lie in a fantastic mythical journey engaged in by a great Talmudic sage, Rabba Bar Chana, Rabbi Abba, the son of Chana, who went to the desert and there was guided by a Ishmaelite merchant, which is a euphemism, or a metaphor rather, for wisdom, because a merchant buys and sells, and wisdom is something that one acquires through experience and through thought and through study. So the rabbis say that this Ishmaelite merchant is a metaphor for wisdom. And he was to be the tour guide of Rabba Bar Chana, and he takes him to see a number of remarkable sights in the wilderness. The second site that he takes him to see, famous places from our biblical stories, is Mount Sinai itself. And what Rabba Bar Chana sees there is the unique shape of the mountain and so forth, but what he hears is even more interesting. You see, he hears a divine voice, a heavenly voice coming out and saying, "Woe unto me, for I have taken an oath. And now that I have taken this oath, who shall nullify it for me?" Rabba Bar Chana hears that and says absolutely nothing. He is silent. And when he comes back to the academy after his traveling in the desert, he tells it to his rabbinical colleagues, and they seemingly insult him. They say every Abba is a donkey, and every son of Chana is a fool. That's what they say. That seems to be pretty harsh. Why are they upset with him? Because they said, this oath that you heard God, or the heavenly voice, which is basically God speaking to you, this oath which you heard was the oath that he swore to exile his children and destroy the temple, basically. Had you nullified that oath, the redemption would have commenced immediately and the world would have rejoiced. You had an opportunity, you blew it. And Rabba Bar Chana in his defense might say, well, how do I know it was that oath? God took an oath earlier that he would never bring another flood to destroy humanity. Maybe it was that oath, and I was afraid that that would be what God wants nullified, and I didn't want to nullify that because who wants another flood? So the rabbis, it seems to be a reasonable concern on Rabba Bar Chana's part. Why are they so insulting and so dismissive? Because they say, when God said in that oath, woe unto me, those first two words, oy li, woe unto me, that gives it away that it's the oath of the exile. Really? How come? I could see that phrase as being the oath of the flood. Woe unto me, I can't punish humanity anymore because I swore not to. So how does that work? Another question, a few questions here. The most interesting one is, well, why didn't the rabbis, if they heard that that oath was out there to be nullified, why didn't they immediately get on their bicycles or donkeys or horses or camels or whatever they would use and get themselves down to that desert and meet that Ishmaelite merchant and ask him to take them to Mount Sinai so that they could hear this voice and they can nullify the oath and save the world? Goodness gracious, if people would know that they just need to go to someplace in the Sinai desert and say, it is nullified for you, and they're going to bring the redemption, I think anybody would run to do that. And also, why were they so insulting to Rabbi Abba Bar Chana? Why did they say every Abba? They're not just insulting him, they're insulting anybody whose name is Abba. And there are a few Talmudic sages named Abba. Every Abba is a donkey, is a fool. Why did they say that? Why were they so nasty? It seems nasty. Let's talk about the first destination that this merchant took Rabba Bar Chana to see, because this is no less amazing. He says, I will show you the deceased generation of the desert. He's referring to the Israelites who, when they heard the report of the spies and cried that they can't go into the land of Israel, so God punished them by saying that they would not enter the land of Israel, they would die in the desert. And they stayed in the same place for about 38 years. And every year a certain number of them would die, and they were there in the desert. So the merchant was going to show Rabbi Bar Bar Chana this generation, and he goes and he sees these people in open graves, lying there looking very much as if they were just in a drunken stupor. But what interested him was what the men were wearing. You see, they had on them the ritual fringes, the tzitzit. And immediately, Rabbi Bar Bar Chana, being a Talmudic sage, says, ooh, there's an argument between the great scholars Hillel and Shammai about how many threads and how many knots there have to be in the ritual fringes. Well, these people, they were taught the laws by Moses himself. They were the ones who left Egypt. They were the ones who stood at Mount Sinai. Their fringes must be correct, so I'm going to cut off a corner and take some fringes with me back to the academy and show it to my colleagues, and we will resolve that argument between Hillel and Shammai once and for all. So he does so, but the minute he gets on his donkey to ride away, or camel, whatever he's riding on, the animal cannot move. He's stuck there. And the Ishmaelite merchant says to him, hey, did you happen to take something from this deceased generation? Because if you did, you'll never leave here. We have a tradition that anybody who takes anything from these people cannot move from their spot. You'll be stuck here forever. You better return it, whatever it was. So Rabbi Bar Bar Chana shrugs his shoulders, takes the threads out, puts them back, and then he can leave. When he comes back to the academy and tells them this part of the story as well, they insult him again. Every Abba is a donkey, and every Bar Bar Chana is a fool. You should have just looked at the threads, counted them, counted the knots, and told us what you saw. You didn't have to bring it in. It's not show and tell. Question. They seem to be right. Why didn't Rabbi Bar Bar Chana just look at the threads, count them, and tell them it's like Hillel or it's like Shammai? Why did he need to bring the actual threads back? And why is it that if someone were to cut the threads off, they couldn't leave the spot? They'd be glued there. Why was that the case? You see, when the rabbis tell us these stories, they are telling us wisdom beneath the stories. It's not necessarily meant to be that this actually happened. It is definitely with a didactic purpose. And I think the purpose can be hinted at in the very name of Rabbi Abba Bar Bar Chana. We don't know his own name. He's called Rabbi Abba. Abba means father. That's in the past. The son of Chana. That's way in the past. In other words, Rabbi Abba seems to be somebody who is not willing to take responsibility for the present. He's saying in these instances, we have to live according to the past. And that may be the significance of taking the actual fringes without looking at them. You see, because the Torah tradition is not that we disregard the past, the opposite is the case. We revere the past. We learn from it, but we always must connect the past to the present. The rabbis who are no longer alive do not have any authority to make decisions for us. The rabbis who are alive, however, do, and they will often do so by understanding the opinion of those prior generation rabbis and applying them to the current situation, to the current world. So the past teaches us what to do in the present in order to bring about a brighter future. So that is the approach, but we do not get our rabbinical leadership from people who are no longer alive. And therefore, that's the symbolism. If you take the actual fringes of those people in the desert, the deceased generation, it's as if you are saying, you are the ones who are deciding for us. If you do that, you will become fossilized. You will become stuck in history, stuck in your place, stuck in that desert with those deceased people and never able to leave. Judaism then becomes something which exists only in a museum. We do not allow ancient rabbis to tell us what to do, but rather we require our rabbis to understand what those ancient rabbis taught, but our rabbis must be in the present. And so therefore Rabbi Bar Bar Chana made a mistake, according to his colleagues. What he should have done was he should have looked at those threads, counted them, counted the knots. In other words, yes, learn from the past, But you filter it through your own understanding, and then you come back to the academy and you convince us. Convince us which way is the right way to do it. And then we will listen to you. And perhaps that's the meaning of the insult that they give him, which seems to insult anybody named Abba. They're saying anybody who puts the responsibility for making the decisions on their father or their grandfather or great-great-grandmother or any previous generation is a fool, because you cannot live in the past. Which brings us to the oath at Mount Sinai. Now, the rabbis are saying that when God says, "Woe unto me, for I have taken an oath, and now that I have taken an oath, who will nullify it for me?" This must be referring to something in the present. You see, the oath about not bringing a flood, that was in the past. At the moment, there is no issue with a flood. But at the moment, what is there an issue with? The fact that the Israelites, the Jewish people, are in exile. They are not in their temple. God's people are not dining with him at his table, as it were. So therefore, that's the woe is to me. Now, in order to gain a deeper understanding of this particular oath, we look at the parsha that we just read, which talks about the nullification of vows. Now, the nullification of vows is, in the Torah, something that happens between a husband and his wife or a father and his daughter. A husband who hears his wife take some kind of an oath that causes her to deprive herself of something. Let's say she swears not to have, cottage cheese. And, well, cottage cheese is very important in their home. So he has the authority to immediately say, that oath is nullified. I will not accept that oath, and she is henceforth allowed to eat cottage cheese. But there's a rule for that. And the same thing applies with a father when he hears his daughter take an oath that she's not going to eat roast beef, whatever. There is one caveat. That nullification must take place on the same day that the oath is taken. If they wait for a day, then it's too late. Then the oath indeed comes into force. And well, it seems to be that what and some of the rabbis explain this encounter that Rabbi Bar Chana has with the divine oath at Mount Sinai in this exact fashion. When God says, first of all, "Woe unto me," he's telling us that the oath is something that causes he himself deprivation. Now, the flood is not a woe unto me. The flood doesn't cause God any deprivation at all whatsoever. That's the problem for humanity. But when he says, "Woe unto me," that means it's something that causes God to feel deprivation. And what causes God to feel deprivation? Well, if his children, the Jewish people, are exiled from his table, are not in his temple, are not bringing sacrifices. And that's how the rabbis know that the oath refers to the exile. And then, what is remarkable? Because God says, "and now," that word "now" implies that this oath is now, it's today. You only have today to nullify the oath, just like in the biblical commandment that the father or the husband can only nullify the oath on the day they hear it. If they wait, too late. So now that I have taken that oath, emphasize the word now, who will nullify it for me? Well, there's only one person there listening, Rabbi Bar Chana. He's the only one. So God is basically saying, I am empowering you at this moment to step up and be a leader in the present, nullify this oath, and change the history of our people and the world. But Rabbi Bar Chana is concerned, me? Who am I? I'm not as great as my ancestors, as my father, as my great-grandfather or great-grandmother, or whoever came in those ancient times. I'm not. Who am I? And he's silent, paralyzed. And that is what the rabbis are saying. Somebody who doesn't feel that they have the responsibility for now is basically a fool. They're missing out on the opportunity to change the world. God's name is 4 letters, and they imply God was, is, and shall be. You see, the past and the present and the future, because God is one, are all unified. We don't live in the past to the exclusion of the present. Rather, we take the past into the present to guide us towards the future. And it reminds me of the Song of Songs of Solomon, where he talks about the beloved inside her chambers, and she hears the beloved knocking on the door, and that's God. Inside, it's the metaphor for the people of Israel, hearing God knocking on the door, and inside the people are hesitant. Can I get up? Am I worthy to open the door? Can I make my feet dirty to go and open the door? And she hesitates. And because she hesitates, by the time she finally gets to open the door, her beloved has disappeared. And it will be a long, arduous journey in order to find him once again. And that is seemingly what's happening here too. That's why the rabbis can't get on their camels or bicycles or whatever and go down to the desert, because the opportunity was missed. Whenever we sense that we are in the place to make a difference, we mustn't hesitate. We must have full self-confidence. And that brings us to the 9th of Av. We do not celebrate or mourn on the 9th of Av because something happened in the past. We do not live in the past. We mourn because of the present. At the present, our relationship with God is not complete. God is saying, "Oily, woe unto me," because we are not fully present in the temple. And so therefore we are mourning the past because of what we lack in the present, which creates inside of us a tremendous desire to fix this, to return to the Lord, to do repentance, and to see the rebuilding of the temple, and to once again be at God's table. Now, an interesting historical note, and with this I conclude, that at the times of the Second Temple, most people would rejoice on Tisha B'Av because, well, the temple is built. But there were some who persisted in fasting because the first temple had been destroyed on the 9th of Av, even at the time when the second temple was standing in all of its grandeur and glory, and when the sacrifices were being brought every day. Why are they still fasting on Tisha B'Av if the temple is still standing? And so Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik, gives a poignant answer. Because they wanted to make sure it never happened again. We nowadays are blessed with the state of Israel, to live in the land of Israel. It is a dream. And perhaps Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, is even more important now because we are fasting to realize how much we lost, how much our relationship with God is still weak, but also what blessings we have been worthy to see in our time, and to treasure them and to work so hard so that not only do we never lose them again, but they only grow and they only blossom and they only become even more beautiful. So we do not live in the past, but we learn from the past to make changes in the present to bring about an even more glorious future.